Hello and welcome to Instant Transmission, a podcast where we discuss everything Dragon Ball and my top 7 theories on why the series is called Sandland. Tonight's episode is a continuation of our Sandland coverage as we finish off Toriyama's miniseries in our part 2 of 2 coverage. Open up your windows and get ready to absorb some darkness because we're about to continue our adventure with Beelzebub and the gang. I'm your host Dayton, and once again I'm joined by my co-host Todd.
Hi.
Tonight, we'll be covering Sandland, the series, episodes 7 through 13. As we finish the series, the story is nicely cut into 2 different story arcs, with the first ending with the defeat of Supreme Commander Zhao and Sandland's main water supply being restored to the region, with no real indication of where they're going next. So with all of that covered, did you want to just jump right into it, Todd?
Let's just jump right in.
All right, so episode 7 is On to a New Adventure. And this episode of Sandland begins with this little creature with stubby-looking wing things that's like an angel or something, claiming to have finally found it. This was a very confusing start to the series for me.
It's a weird opener. We find out like it connects a lot of pieces later on, which is good. But yeah, we're given just a brand new character, some sort of weird vase-looking bottle thing, and then it kind of cuts over to more of our main cast as we find General Shiva or Rao, whatever you want to call this guy, driving back to the demon village to meet up with Beelzebub.
Now, if I understood the sub correctly, they made it sound like Shiva's sheriff mobile was fixed up by the funky looking bandits that sabotaged it way back in our last episode of Instant Transmission.
That's the way I understood it. The guys that both popped his tires, tried to steal his shit, and then he whooped their asses.
It's funny how Toriyama always finds a way to make like the villainous characters kind of wholesome in a weird way.
Very much so. I also really like, and we'll talk about it more as we go through this, but this season or this story arc ties things together really nicely. Like everything feels like it's referenced somewhere previous in the story.
Yeah, and we see Shiva, since he's got like 4 different names, Sheriff, Shiva, Rao. We see Shiva rolling up in his Pimp-mobile to the Demon Village, and Beelzebub is offered a seat in the sheriff's car while he makes a trip to, was it Pitchy Village? Is the pronunciation we decided on?
Pitchy, peachy, something close to that.
Okay. Yeah, and apparently he's on his way to deliver some supplies. And when Shiva makes his offer, all the demons once again disappear, and Thief is once again roped into another adventure.
I mean, we gotta have Thief, man. It's kind of funny because pretty much none of the other demons get fleshed out. We got Beelzebub and Thief, and then they other demons have cool character designs, but we don't know anything about them.
You almost expected like either the ghost or the centaur to be like a character that gets dragged along at some point, because those were like the other 2 that we were introduced to with Beelzebub when we first met him.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, we quickly move away from the demons and the demon village as they kind of go on this little journey. We get a little shot of the swimmers now swimming in water in Sandland, because as we all know in the last arc that they released the dam that was keeping the water from flowing into Sandland. And then our main cast kind of goes into town where Beelzebub, while playing a video game, is verbally accosted by this new character that we saw at the beginning of the episode, this angelic blue-haired bob cut character in a romper with a staff.
I have 2 big things with this character, right? The first thing is that the wings are gross looking to me. They're like these little fleshy stubs that stick out the back. I'm not a fan. They're gross. And also, I feel like the staff used by this character is very similar to the ones used by the angels in Dragon Ball Super.
100%. I think there are a lot of parallels or connections here. to Dragon Ball material, and we're going to try to point them out as we go. Even I don't think that you've seen this part in the manga, Dayton, but there's even characters, angelic characters, who are almost this exact character design with that same sort of like haircut and everything.
Oh wow, so that's wild. So this is something that Toriyama's used a few times then.
Yeah, and I actually I know I agree with you. The wings are gross, but I really like when we find out why they look the way they do.
Well, things don't take long before they escalate as our angel character goes on the attack, and we see him blaming Beelzebub and fiends for the loss of his wings. And we see Beelzebub entertaining this angel character. I don't know if we're given a name yet. I'm gonna start using names so that way I don't have to worry about it. This character's named Muniel, I think is how it's pronounced.
I think so.
And we see Muniel go on the attack, and Beelzebub's kind of, going along with it for a minute. And when he decides to kick things up, he actually hits Muniel with a flick to the angel's head that sends him like cratering down into the earth. And this is where we see Muniel starting to whip out some special moves. This is where things start getting interesting as he attempts to summon this lightning storm and then notices that, oh, wow, it's a lot drier here. This lightning storm is not really coming together.
Yeah. He says there's not enough humidity. He's got this tiny little cloud, and he's like, "Hey, come closer so I can hit you with my lightning." These are pretty typical Toriyama gags. It's interesting because Beelzebub is the protagonist, right? Or at least from our perspective, is the main character, even though he's a demon, and he's kind of being accosted by an angel. So we're kind of circumventing, traditional expectations of like Beelzebub is the good guy, sort of. Especially because even at this point, Muniel, the angel, just picks a fight with Beelzebub out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, Muniel just kind of looking like a jerk at this point. Beelzebub was just kind of sitting around playing his Game Boy when suddenly he gets attacked. We also see Muniel whip out this special move where he almost like puts his fingers up and then takes control of Beelzebub's body, kind of throwing him backwards and then pulling him towards him, almost as if he's got him like by puppet strings or something like that. And Beelzebub is forced to kind of take things seriously suddenly, and he breaks out of it just through sheer anger or brute force.
Yeah. Muniel gets kind of scared at this point and pulls out the item that we saw him with at the very beginning. This sort of like, it's like a black vase or bottle, basically, with an eyeball that's closed on it. And then he follows that up with that, whatever that sort of threat is of this menacing object, with a lightning bolt to Beelzebub's video game system, destroying his game.
And spoiler alert, this is going to become a little bit of a trope with Muniel, and I think it's hilarious. He fries Beelzebub's game, basically claims victory, and then retreats off scene like a coward. It's fantastic. I actually love this writing from Toriyama.
It's pretty funny. It's a pretty funny gag. It makes Muniel feel kind of like a Pilaf character, right? Like a bad guy or an antagonist who is just kind of incompetent.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is our last real encounter with Muniel for a minute, as our crew they stumble upon the lady with dreads that we saw previewed at the end of the last scene, or the last story arc. And we see that she's being chased by some robots while she's on this like motorcycle thing. We see her like jump off a cliff, and then like turns out the motorcycle could hover, and she shoots a couple of the robots. And then when she comes back up, she's knocked off her hover bike, which causes her to get knocked out. And this robot takes this little capsule thing that she has and begins floating off.
Yeah, absolutely. There is also a brief little scene that I want to make sure we touch on with our main cast and the Peachy guys, um, which is gonna come up later because the Peachy give a gift to Beelzebub and to General Shiva. Shiva gets a gun. It's basically like a stun gun, and then Beelzebub gets this. It's like a candy dispenser, and the candy allows you to float for 10 seconds.
Oh, yep, that's right. So yeah, they do get the gifts from the PG. Yeah, and then that's when they stumble across the dreadlock lady when she gets robbed by some robots, and our heroes take her and more or less let her rest back to health with them. And when she recovers, she basically at this point has no choice but to join them despite her attempts to immediately flee because her bike is completely destroyed.
Yeah, so they kind of wait out through the night, and then they actually stop at the the explosion site where General Shiva from his past blew up the Aquanium in kind of the war in Sandland previous. I think that was when they actually blew up basically like the Peachy people. We kind of learned about that in the previous arc, and they're basically expressing like this land doesn't grow grass or anything. It's basically like a wasteland. And then I think from there, our blonde-haired dreadlock character starts to give a little bit more detail. I think revealing her name to be Anne, and I think also revealing that she's from the forest land. I think they call them different countries, and that she's trying to stop the forest land people from using technology basically as weapons, more or less. I think is the only information she gives them up to this point.
Yeah, we learned that the head of the military is somebody named Bread, and they're going to use the Aquanium to make some sort of weapon. And when Anne asks, like, or when the crew postulate, well, what can we do? What can we do to stop Forestland from creating these weapons and hurting a lot of people? Shiva reveals that the Royal Army likely can't get involved. I'm sorry. I believe he also talks to Ari not too long after this. But anyway, um, that the Royal Army can't get involved due to the possibility of it starting a war. So our heroes decide to help this girl named Anne resolve the conflict. And this is where she leads them through a series of secret caves into a lush forest.
Yeah,
This
and
story is, I feel like I'm getting just like information dumped. Um, I don't like the pacing of this episode just because I feel like we've got to establish plot point after plot point after plot point to get the story moving along. So for me, this one was a little hard for me to follow, especially because I'm watching it in the sub and they're starting to throw around so many names at once where I'm like, all right, I don't remember who anyone is or what anything is.
admittedly, the first couple of episodes of this arc, I really didn't think I was going to like this story arc at all. By the end of it, I liked it a lot more. It's weird, right? Because they really need to establish what this next arc is. Because, as you and I said before, when we finished the last arc, it's a self-contained story. Like they resolved all of the points for the story last time, and so we're having to get all of the details for what this new story is going to be, and largely surrounding this new character Anne. And I'm so torn on the pacing because it's a lot of information, but at the same time they don't waste time getting to like the exposition and setting up the story. It's just a lot to front load the audience with.
Well, it's also the storytelling device, right? Like they're telling us all this stuff rather than
Right.
showing us. We've got a visual medium, let's use it. But instead, we're getting just a lot of characters being introduced and dialogue and backstory and history. And like there's all this stuff that's just being kind of dumped on me. And I'm just like, all right, I don't know why I care, but I know I should. So that's my kind of one critique at the beginning of this set of episodes is that I feel like I'm just being told things and I'm not really experiencing anything.
I agree. I mean, the most that we experience is Anne being chased and the Aquanium being stolen from her by these little droids or robots. But yeah, almost everything else is just exposition, which is a bummer. But I think that kind of leads us into the next episode.
Yes, which is episode 8, Operation Sneak into the Capital. And our heroes make their way through this lush forest. Beelzebub actually learning to enjoy himself in the lush green environment and ponds as he influences the rest of our cast members to jump in and have a little fun with him.
Yeah, he's kind of swinging through the trees, jumping in the water and stuff. There was definitely a part of me that briefly was like, they must have some sort of explanation for why they just didn't get water from forest land, because this place has a lot of it. But I don't think we really get that explanation. And our heroes, as they set up camp, are eventually kind of assaulted. I think Beelzebub at night is shot in the back of the head.
Yes, while he's pissing.
While he's pissing, yeah, as these humans kind of shoot him in the back of the head. Eventually finding out that these humans are part of the resistance in Forest Land, and they are allies to our girl Anne.
Yes, and we get more information dump as we find out that these are members of the resistance, and everyone meets each other, and we learn that King Jam, who was in charge before Supreme Commander Bread took over, is set to be executed tomorrow. We also learn that King Jam's daughter is Anne, and she's a princess.
I only just realized, as you said, that the names, that the fucking Forest Land characters, Jam and Bread. I only just realized the puns in that, and Toriyama loves his character name puns. I don't know what Anne would be, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that one out myself. I'm not sure what Anne stands for, but
I don't know. Maybe it's just bread and jam for whatever silly reason.
So either way, our heroes borrow some hover bikes from the resistance members and they zoom off to save the king, as the villains of this story arc, Muniel and Brad, reveal that the king's execution was all just a ploy to draw the princess out, which I like that. We're seeing the villains as competent villains with our introduction. Like, they're doing clever things.
Yeah. I think that this is... if you said it, I missed it, but I think this is where Anne reveals that she herself is the princess. Am I jumping the gun here?
No. That was part of my previous explanation.
Oh, sorry. I missed the part. So yeah, she is basically the princess. She wants to save her father. But yeah, it's basically, as they try to set up this whole idea to go into the city and stop the execution, they do find that it is a trap for our heroes.
Yeah, and our heroes are spotted on their way in, so the villains know that they're coming, and our heroes do stop at the edge of this kingdom town thing, whatever this is, and this is where they spend the night to prepare. And Beelzebub, he tries to absorb darkness, his thing where he goes up and looks at the moon and powers up, but he mentions that he struggles to do it this night. He's not able to absorb darkness due to the cloud cover in the sky. And so that's a point that is more important than I realized it was going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be relevant as they kind of sneak in. We find that I mean, I don't know that this is really unique to Forest Land, but they basically express that in Forest Land they don't like demons, which, I mean, the people in Sandland don't really like them either, so not necessarily unique in that way. But because of that, Thief and Beelzebub need to wear disguises. Anne has to disguise herself because she's recognizable as the princess. But they go into the execution here, and Beelzebub and Anne kind of infiltrate to stop the execution, whereas Thief and Shiva infiltrate what I guess is like the the king's castle or whatever to get the aquanium, the rock that Anne kind of lost when they met her. And
The water themed uranium, yeah.
I didn't even make that connection, but yeah.
I think this is actually one of the more character driven scenes in the show, where we see the Shiva and Thief pair off, and Beelzebub and Anne pair off. We see Anne and Beelzebub kind of childishly like sniping at each other as they're walking through the town. So we're seeing kind of their more outward characters really bubbling to the surface, maybe even some of their immaturity. And we get to see Shiva and Thief. We get to see Shiva be an absolute badass as he tries to figure out how to infiltrate in. He decides to just walk up and remove his costume and yell at these military men that if he wants to be ID'd, they better like watch their asses, because they should recognize a superior officer. Like he just like no sells this like I'm in charge kind of vibe, and I love it.
I really enjoy it. She was probably one of my favorite characters in this whole thing. And yes, he just knows how to put on the right attitude and just completely get him and Thief into this building.
We also don't see Thief putting up too much protest either. So I'd like to point out that his character is actually becoming a little bit more braver as we go further and further into the series.
That's a good point. He also is going to be, as Shiva and Thief get a little bit deeper, these scenes kind of like go back and forth. But as they get deeper into infiltrate, Thief is actually the one who uses his skills as a thief to pick the lock to the aquanium. We do see Shiva using the gun that he got from the Peachy people too, to stun some of the guards rather than having to shoot them and kill them with a normal gun.
Yeah, it's fun. I like seeing these little trinkets and stuff like that actually be used. There was also mention of the funny faces they make when they get knocked out, and like when they get shot with it, they like smile widely and then like pass out. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a little goofy and funny, but it's again, fun. Yeah, fun Toriyama gags, making it more than just a stun gun. It has some sort of goofy quirk to it.
Yeah. So they grab the aquanium and they begin to run, and we flip back over to Beelzebub and Anne, where Beelzebub is kind of moved off to the side and is waiting for Anne to give I guess a mental signal for him to step in and save her father. When her father is led on stage, he's like cuffed up, he's got like a bag over his head. We see Anne give the signal, and as Beelzebub goes to step in, this is where he's kind of stopped immediately by Muniel, who's summoned a storm and a whole troop of guard to stop Beelzebub from being able to actually act.
This is kind of where it's very clear here that this was some sort of trap. Like they knew that Beelzebub was going to be at the execution. I think the episode kind of cuts back kind of on our final note here as Shiva and Thief are trying to escape the complex where the aquanium is, being chased now by some of the guards, and what seems to be one guard in particular, this massive armored man with like a white beard and helmet and everything. He like breaks through the wall and introduces himself as I can't remember what his title is. Bread is his name. I can't remember if it's commander or general. But he is there to stop Shiva. So once more, this kind of being some sort of setup for our good guys.
Yeah, and after that really hard punch through walls and everything, that kind of brings that episode to an end, which brings us into episode 9, Fiend Power. And Shiva and Bread exchange words, Bread accusing Shiva of working with fiends for evil petty causes, and Shiva correctly accusing Bread of stealing aquanium for heinous intentions. And I mean, this show moves quick because they basically have a small exchange. And then we see Shiva hand the Aquanium over to Thief, gestures for him to leave, and the two just start doing battle, which I mean, I also love the way that they set the two characters up with the shot as we're kind of back looking from behind Shiva, and we see just the size difference between these two combatants. Like this bread guy absolutely towers over Shiva.
Yeah, 100%. He's a good 2 or 3 times the size of Shiva. But as you said, Shiva passes off the Aquanium to Thief, fully intent on fighting this bread fellow. And I'm not gonna lie, anytime that Shiva throws fists, I get so excited. And this is no exception. Like, the fight starts off very cool with Shiva like weaving and ducking into range and just delivering like 2 solid blows to Bread's face, knocking his helmet off, which reveals that Bread is a cyborg. Half of his face is this sort of metallic robot look to it, even coming like down to his neck, which is going to make it a hell of a challenge for Shiva.
Yeah, and it's not looking good for Shiva as Bread goes back on the attack. His just overwhelming strength proving to be a little bit too much for our old sheriff. Even ducking under a blow that just blows out the wall behind him. But Shiva makes a comment that he's too tensed up and then turns his tonfa around and hooks him under Bread's feet, pulling his feet out from under him and then using that brief moment to actually escape out of the hole that he had punched through the wall.
I really love this. There's one point where Shiva gets like a really good jab with the tonfa to Bread's face, but to no avail given the fact that he's a cyborg. I like these action sequences. I really enjoy these hand-to-hand action fights. Are pretty well done.
I think this is probably one of the best action sequences in the whole show right here. Just the way that it's set up. It's not over the top, but the attention to details there. I like this a lot.
Yeah, I very much agree. Very well done.
It's so brief. That's always my problem. It's so brief. Give me more of this.
It's like 30 seconds, maybe. It's
like,
very,
come on,
very
like short. I'm coming from Dragon Ball. You can't just you can't tease me like this.
Yeah, this, in terms of action, I feel like this arc had significantly less than the first arc. But we kind of shift back over to some more action here with Beelzebub and Muniel, and they kind of engage in a fight where Muniel is using that puppeteering power on the soldiers and using it to attack Beelzebub with multiple soldiers at a time, not caring at all about the safety of these humans.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels... I have so many questions about this because this feels like such a despicable power to be able to control somebody like that. Like, I wonder, is this like an ability that all angels have? Is this like his own unique ability? Or is there maybe a way where this is supposed to be used like in a non-violent way and he's just like abusing it? I have so many questions, and spoiler alert, none of them will be answered.
That's fair. I mean, this is a lot of this story is clearly to circumvent expectations, right? The angel is the bad guy, the demon is the good guy, and I like that Muniel, or angels in general or whatever, have this ability, because this ability to just control people against their will does not feel like a good ability.
I mean, I don't know, it's kind of on like the same level as like when Kami took over a guy's body to enter the World Martial Arts Tournament. I'm like, is this really a good guy thing? Are we the baddies?
Yeah, 100%. That feels pretty morally ambiguous, or maybe even just morally bad, honestly. So yeah. I like that Toriyama does that with his characters.
Yeah, well, the fight's not going to go the way we'd like because Beelzebub's feeling quite undersauced after being unable to absorb darkness last night. And Muniel's terrible tactics of using guards as like puppet shields is really throwing Beelzebub off. Even like throwing bodies at him and then striking down lightning and zapping all of them in just this big electric storm. Muniel doesn't care about the friendly fire. He's here to win. He does, however, thank them for their voluntold sacrifice.
He does. You can tell too that his lightning here is much more effective, and the idea is that forest land has much more humidity in the air, so this is kind of like his home turf where he is much more powerful, and that's kind of like tipping the scales against Beelzebub. And Muniel is actually putting on a show here as these little drone cameras start projecting this feed of this fight to the rest of the audience who's here for the execution. And Muniel is putting on this big performance, basically saying like, I am your hero, I am the angel, I am here to eradicate the demons, and here we have the demon prince who I will now defeat to protect all of you. And I mean, he's making it sound like he's the good guy, but he's just a prick.
Yeah, I mean, the second he says fiend, I think people just start salivating over, the guy being defeated. So he's got everyone under his thumb. He's definitely got everyone brainwashed. And you can tell he's almost like, it's almost intoxicating for him to be on camera and be cheered for. He wants to be that hero figure or god figure or whatever. He wants to be worshipped.
Yeah, 100%. He loves the praise. He eventually brings Beelzebub, pretty beaten up and battered, onto the stage where the execution is happening, and then says, all right, we are going to proceed with the execution of King Jam. And as we know, this is Anne's father, so Beelzebub is unable to help him in this moment, but Anne makes her way through the crowd and just screams like, don't do it. And something about her changes in this moment. Her eyes glow red. You see her voice amplified. You see everybody else responding by like closing their ears. But she certainly stops the execution in this moment. And people are just kind of confused about how and why she was able to do that.
Yeah, and that's not good. And to make things even worse, when she does make her way to the stage, she pulls the hood off her father's head. But it's revealed that this figure is actually not her father and some sort of weird robotic decoy. And so as people question her weird screaming ability and realize that her father's actually not on stage, this is where she's called out for actually being part fiend. And Muniel is able to turn the entire crowd on her as they begin kind of cursing her name and throwing things at the stage and shutting her. And she kind of freezes up for a moment because everything just sort of 180'd for her. But Beelzebub is actually the one who stands back up in front of her, kind of deflecting the rocks and insults and grabbing Anne and fleeing the scene.
Yeah, he has a pretty good little piece of dialogue saying, I'd much rather be a demon than a hateful human. And as they kind of flee, they meet back up with Shiva and Thief, who have the Aquanium. And so they're like, well, the execution was a bust. We weren't able to save King Jam, but we got the Aquanium. Let's get the hell out of here. And as they try to escape, they get caught on a bridge, cut off by Bread and by a bunch of soldiers who surround them on both sides of the bridge. Bread basically saying like, hey, give us the Aquanium or die, basically, and gets ready to fire off on our heroes.
Yeah, well, he was trying to negotiate. He said, if you give me the Aquanium, I'll let you live. And then Muniel busts in and says, actually, no, that demon guy, he doesn't live no matter what. And so at that point, negotiations are over. And this is where we see Biel's reveal a new power as he kind of takes this like horse stance and puts his hands up by his face. And the order's given to open fire on them, and all these shots bounce off of his steel or metal face. Apparently he can turn himself into metal.
I thought this was fun. They call it like metallification or something. They even have a funny name for it. And yeah, actually, what you said about Bread and Muniel is important because this is like a regular or a common dynamic through this arc where Bread is actually willing to negotiate. He doesn't want to kill everybody immediately, whereas Muniel's like, no, fuck them. I want them to die.
Yeah, which once again, it's the angel who's kind of bloodthirsty. It's Toriyama does love turning things on its head.
Yeah, but Beelzebub in his metal form is able to protect his friends from the bullets. And then the tank comes into the fray, fires off a round at Beelzebub, which Beelzebub does deflect it, but it then falls back down onto the bridge behind them.
I actually had a little laugh at this scene because you see it just like as they turn the tank turret. One of them asks like, "Hey, Beelz, like, can you stop that thing?" And he goes, I think so."
Probably.
Just like, probably is not a good answer right now. And then the round like bounces off his head, like goes up into the air and like lifts slowly back down and then crashes into the bridge. The whole scene's set up really well. I give Toriyama credit here. This was a lot of fun.
I really like it too. I also really enjoy the whole metallification of Beelzebub because not only does his skin change, he has to take this like particular stance, but you can see his mouth like just barely moving for him to talk. And he, even when he falls, he's like stuck in that same stance. In fact, even when they fall into water and he's like basically drowning until Shiva tells him like, "Hey, drop the metal for."
So he turns back into normal form. But the current in the water is great, and they're kind of swept away by it. And they're actually saved by a familiar crew of characters as the swimmers just so happen to be down this river. And so our heroes are saved by the swimmers. And we learn that the swimmers were actually sent to help our heroes. And also the aquanium is a fake.
It's cracked, and we know that the aquanium is dangerous. That's what they blew up the Peachy people with. And so Thief like freaks out, like, "Oh god, it's gonna blow." And Shiva is the one who's like, "No, this is a fake. It was a decoy." So they kind of duped us on both the execution and the aquanium.
Yeah, and I think that wraps up that episode. Am I missing anything?
There is just a little detail at the end with Muniel and Bread. They're in this sort of like dark chamber with these pillars of light, and they're saying they basically like put in some aquanium into this device that shoots up this pillar of light into the air, and it looks like there's 4 pillars and there's a 5th that is inactive. And they're basically saying like, "Oh, we need one more piece to complete this," but I don't think we get an idea as to what this is yet.
Yeah, so now we're given a hint, a sniff of what the villains are up to. And after that sniff, we go into episode 10, which is called Muniel's Urn. And I believe this one starts off with a flashback of Anne as a kid. And there's a few things happening here. I wasn't sure what the exact thing I was supposed to pick up was, but we see Bread telling King Jam to preemptively go to war with Sandland, and King Jam actually tells him like, "No, we shouldn't, because we need to care about people and we need to use our machines for kindness, not war," sort of thing. And Bread's upset about it. We see Anne's mother stumbling across the aquanium, and she decides to with King Jam's blessing, take it and hide it by turning into a demon and then flying off into the darkness, but is also spotted by Bread and Muniel. So now they both know that she's a fiend. So yeah, there's like this big important flashback thing that happens.
Yeah. I think one other detail that I guess is just important for Bread's character is that the reason he even wants to go to war with Sandland is because he at one point was in a confrontation with, I think, General Zhao or Commander Zhao. I forget all their titles, but the bad guy from the last season in Sandland.
Supreme Commander Zhao.
There it is. And we kind of get the implication that Bread was injured by Zhao, which presumably is why he's a cyborg now. So he doesn't just hate Sandland for no reason. He's got some beef there. There's some history there.
And that's understandable. We all understand that Supreme Commander Zhao is kind of a dickhead.
100%. I also wanted to point out, too, this is one of those details that kind of connects back to Dragon Ball, where I think we already find out her name, Lilith, the queen, Anne's mother. When she turns into her fiend or demon form, she has like this red and black, like tight-fitted outfit on. It very much is reminiscent of the demon character designs in Dragon Ball. If you see like Toa and Mira from the Xenoverse games, it has almost that exact same design and vibe to it, which I really like. I like that there's a sort of connection between Sandland and Dragon Ball, and maybe even the implication that the demons from the two worlds are one and the same.
We'll find out more in a moment, though, as we flip back to our current timeline where Lango from the Resistance, I decided to write this guy's name down because I didn't realize he was going to come up again. He meets up with our heroes in the swimmers. Word is now getting around about Anne being a fiend. We also learn that Lilith, Anne's mom, is Beelzebub's sister. There's so much information dump in this second part of the series. So yeah. Also, I guess the Forestland Army knows that the Aquanium is in Demon Village, where Lilith and King Lucifer hid it, and they are sending forces to get it.
That seems to be the plan. They sent out an airship to the Demon Village to collect the Aquanium. As we already kind of saw, they have this fifth pillar, whatever this pillar is, that they need to complete for whatever reason. And we also then kind of go into a little flashback, basically just getting the whole details about this black vase and where Lilith is. I think Lango is the one who kind of provides us the information, giving us another exposition dump here, but expressing why Lilith hasn't been seen or hasn't been around in years. And it basically was that Muniel had this magical vase, this one that we've seen throughout the last couple of episodes, and trapped Lilith inside of it. I don't know if there's if it keys in on demon energy. I don't know if it's even explained how that magic item works, but it specifically traps her inside of it.
What's the name of the technique in Dragon Ball where they seal someone in a jar?
The Mafuba. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. This very much has that sort of vibe to it, right?
Yeah, I got that, but also, I'm crossing universes here. I also, because of the eye on the urn, it also gave me a little bit of a Full Metal Alchemist vibes, because that was always the homunculus kind of looking symbol. So I got a couple different vibes from this.
I didn't even notice that, but yeah, the eye actually does look exactly like that eyeball. But yeah, as far as the Mafuba goes, I was like, oh, this feels very much like the Mafuba. There's no technique to it. It's basically just a magic item, but it effectively acts the same way.
Well, in case you wanted more flashbacks, we're doing more flashbacks, baby, as we go over to Muniel. And we actually see him with wings at this moment, putting things on shelves, almost like he's working in an angel warehouse. And we see him complaining. He mentions he's getting impatient at waiting, and he wants to become a senior angel now. And so he decides to kind of shortcut things by stealing an angel staff. And we see him immediately fly down to Demon Village and confront Lucifer, which seems like a terrible idea to anybody with a brain.
Yes, I love this, though, and I love the way that this turns out, because Lucifer is completely ignoring Muniel. I don't care about you. I'm watching my TV show. He has a CRT television on his throne, and he basically says, hey, Muniel, piss off. And Muniel responds by, as you said, Dayton, this is a running trend where Muniel zaps the TV and breaks Lucifer's TV, and Lucifer is pissed.
Yeah, and mind you, Muniel's going to get off pretty easy here because all Lucifer does is basically like lift like two fingers, locking Muniel in place. We see him move those two fingers apart, and we see both wings just plop, just rip off the back of Muniel. And then we see Lucifer kind of bring him in and pull his fingers back and just give him a flick that sends him flying through the side of the building and then like off into space, a la Team Rocket style, where he goes cross continent and crashes down into Forest Land hard.
I love this. I love getting to see how powerful and intimidating Lucifer is. I love getting to see how he's also kind of like his son, where he's just, I'm just watching TV, like, leave me alone. I love this scene is probably the most violent scene that we've seen in all of Sandland. Like, his wings just telepathically being ripped off of his body. It also gives us an explanation as to why he has these creepy looking fleshy chicken wings on his back. And yeah, everything about this, I really enjoy this scene. But
There's also
it kind
some symbolism of him being shot back up to the heavens and then crashing back down. So I think this was very cleverly done.
That's a really good point. It kind of gives that sort of fallen angel sort of vibe too, doesn't it? I really like that too. Now that you say that, that's really good.
Yeah, and this is where we see the Forest Line military kind of come upon Muniel, and this is how their whole meeting happens, right? So now we know why Muniel is where he's at. We also have a pretty good idea as to why he probably hates fiends at this point, because he's not had a good experience with them.
I know you said, and I agree with you, that there's a lot of exposition and just kind of like lore dumping here. But I like that they are at least giving our characters, like the bad guys, reasons for acting the way that they do. Like, Bread has reasons for hating Sandland. Muniel has reasons for hating the demons. At least there's some sort of reasons behind their actions rather than them just being like, I'm gonna go kill these people.
For me, it's more of a pacing thing. Like, I wish we would spend a little bit more time in this stuff and actually get to know these characters and feel their emotion. Like, because I like the story, I just don't like how I feel like it's being kind of fire hosed down my throat at certain times, where like, oh well, they're doing this and we're about to go here, and before we go here, you need to know that this happened in the past, and it's just like, all right, slow it down a little bit and just like, let's enjoy the story a little bit and actually spin me the tale, because rather than just like having a quick flashback, let's do an episode of crap that happened in the past, because I'm here for it.
That's a good point. This arc maybe even could have benefited from being its own like 13 episode story arc, but yeah, I think they've only got, what is it, seven episodes to really give us this information. So yeah, it does suffer in terms of pacing in that way. But we kind of push forward here as our heroes now, Beelzebub and the others, are trying to race the bad guys back to the demon village, now knowing that Muniel and Bread with their soldiers are going to the demon village to attack it. But they also know that at first they were like, oh, Lucifer's there. Lucifer's going to whoop their asses. But now they know that Muniel has this jar or whatever it is, this magic item that trapped Lilith and potentially could trap Lucifer.
Yeah, and they better race fast, because as soon as Brett and Muniel arrive at Demon Village, they don't announce anything. They just open fire and begin bombarding the place. Like, there are explosions. Fiends are running for their lives. Demon even runs up to Lucifer and says, hey, we're being attacked. Like, help. And Lucifer just says, nah, just leave. And he just remains in his chair as everything's blowing up. It gets to the point where his entire room is blown up, and he's revealed to be just sitting there in his chair, like working on a puzzle.
Yeah. And I mean, this is, again, I like the characterization for Lucifer, because as Muniel and Bread step out to confront him, Lucifer says, you've attacked my home, but worse than that, you've messed up the jigsaw puzzle that I was working on.
It was a 10,000 piece puzzle. You know how much time he probably put into that thing?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and we see Lucifer start going through the same steps again, right? We see him lift those two fingers up, and we see Muniel lift off the ground, and things are looking like they're going to repeat. But this is where Brad reveals that urn, and we see him open it up, and this brilliant, bright red light comes flying out the top, and the demon king, Lucifer, is now trapped away within an urn.
Yeah. This is a big deal as Beelzebub is trying to make his way back to the demon village and fails to do so in
This is
time.
good storytelling. Because you're taking the trump cards off the table, right? Like now it's up to our hero. So this is a very necessary event.
And to give them some props here, I agree with you. I didn't think that I was going to like this storyline. I was kind of like, we've introduced Anne, like maybe this is just going to be the heroes helping Anne, but that's not it, because this actually ties back to Beelzebub, and actually to, I mean, Beelzebub's family is now under attack. Lucifer has been trapped, who is like, in like Dragon Ball, you always have the idea that like Goku, if Goku's not there, eventually Goku will get there and save the day. It's kind of not, in a way, that's kind of like what Lucifer is. Lucifer is like a trump card for the demons. If anything bad happens, we get the impression that Lucifer is strong enough to fix it, to solve the problem. And now Lucifer has been taken off the board, and so Beelzebub is, he's going to have to solve this problem himself.
Yep. And as the villains walk away from Demon Village with Lucifer in urn, Aquanium in hand, that more or less brings this episode to an end as we move into episode 11, Flying Fortress Graham. And Fred and Muniel return with the final piece of Aquanium they need and insert it into the big mechanical pillar contraption thing. And we see the machine begin powering up. And we learn that this big machine is actually the Flying Fortress Graham. And we see, Muniel, he's jumping in joy because he's power hungry, and he knows that this giant machine that they've just awakened is powerful. And as it slowly lurches forward from the crater it's in and floats into the sky, the first thing he wants to do is test out the weapons.
Yeah, and test out the weapons they do, as they basically, you see this big fortress Graham as it rises up into the air. It begins charging this big energy blast, and they basically just fire it off, blowing up an entire chunk of the landscape. It looks like it kind of destroys like an entire mountain with a single blast. This thing is no joke. But we do find out that it has a charge or a recharge time, so they have to wait. I think they say 5 hours to shoot the main weapon again.
Yeah. So we know things are bad. We know things are real bad. And as we flip over to our heroes who lay down to rest, we see that Beelzebub is unable to sleep. As I think Thief explains that it's over fear and anger over the possible loss of his father. So we're seeing Beelzebub kind of being stressed out over the situation. And in the morning, we actually see Ari and the Sandland Royal Army arrive to meet our heroes to see what the hell just happened at Demon Village. And this is where Shiva explains the situation, the Aquanium and the Forestland Army. And it's even at this point, they start getting in radio reports of the Forestland Army preparing to invade Sandland. As reports begin flowing in of Muniel announcing the Flying Fortress Graham's arrival.
Yeah, and actually, I think I jumped the gun with the blast, because Muniel actually fires the main weapon once more in Forest Land. This time, I think they say that he didn't let the weapon charge all the way, but it still wipes out an entire mountain. And I think that this one was fired off where they believed the resistance to be located.
Yeah, they think they've got an idea of or know where the Resistance's secret base is, and they wipe out the entire mountain that it's sitting in. And with this like mega blast, this is their official declaration of war. Um, and there's this brief moment where Anne is upset that her friends in the Resistance got wiped out, but don't worry. The swimmers are once again here for some reason, and they've brought with them the members of the Resistance who managed to flee the base before it was destroyed.
Yeah, so this will kind of be one of my bigger complaints about this show is that, and we talked about it last time, it feels very much like it's aimed towards a younger audience. Like, nobody died in this scenario. All of the Resistance was able to escape, which to me is, I don't know. It's a feel good story, I guess, but is a little bit disappointing that there's no loss, no tragedy, and it is also just kind of funny and goofy that the swimmers keep showing up to help for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely feels hand wavy when you're just like, actually, everyone got out. It's like, well, okay, all right. I mean, if they all died, like, at least it meant a little bit of something, but, I don't know.
It kind of ruins the tension and the consequences for me, I guess, but I don't know. We'll see what this looks like going forward as Beelzebub kind of is now ready to fight the bad guys. He's like, hey, I got a plan. Let's go punch them real hard.
Yeah, and the plan is everyone else figures out how to get him to the bad guys, and he'll punch them. And I don't know. This scene's kind of interesting, where all the weird like abilities of the swimmers start coming into play. Like the one who has like this photographic memory and can draw like photorealistic pictures. He draws them a picture of the Fortress Graham, and they're able to kind of like pick apart like different strategies on fighting it based off of his super realistic like skills. Like he's able to like zoom in on stuff with his like photorealistic drawings. It's interesting. I'll give him credit on that.
I actually do I agree with you. I kind of like it. And this is kind of what I was talking about, where this arc is like everything ties together nicely and neatly, where they're using powers or abilities or whatever everything's already kind of been established previously, and they keep pulling those elements back in and referencing them. So I actually do like those parts of this story. They do a good job of tying things back to the previous narrative.
Yeah, so they get together their plan, and they all decide to execute on it as the Fortress Graham arrives and the battle begins. The tanks and the swimmers begin by targeting the bomb drones and taking them out, but things get bad when the Graham begins dropping like 3-story tall bipedal laser mechs. I'm sorry, I thought this was silly as hell as they figure out that their vision is based off of movement a la Jurassic Park, and then all begin running around. This was very, very silly to me.
Like, I agree for the most part. There's, again, they try to tie in like people's skills and abilities. Like, I think Shark or whatever the other swimmer kid's name is, he's able to run fast, so he can kind of like mess up the sensors of the robots.
That one I get a pass. Everyone else just running around was just like, okay, this is ridiculous.
I agree, especially the tanks just like running circles around them. It's like these tanks are slow. Like the robots are just going to blast them.
Their vision is based on movement, but they can't hit things that are moving.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring this up too, because I really enjoyed, even though they were relatively simple, I really enjoyed the tank fight tactics in the previous arc. I liked a lot of what General Shiva did. It was really fun to see how he would fight in an outnumbered tank fight. This fight, though, I didn't like the tactics in this one. Like you said, it feels a little bit silly how they kind of outmaneuvered these robots who can sense motion, but a slow moving tank is too much for their motion sensor. Like that feels ridiculous.
Yeah, like Shiva using the sun to his back to kind of obfuscate himself and give himself a good shot and give his opponents a bad shot. It's such a small thing, but it's very clever. And you're like, yeah, it makes. Have you ever looked at the sun? It's bright. Like, yeah, that would work. Um, Here, this felt very like hand wavy, right? Just like with the rebels got out hand wave. Here, it's just like, well, they can't hit things that are moving hand wave. There's no like tactic to it. It feels like I mean, it feels like a hand wave. I don't know. I'm going to say I actively don't like this battle. I actively dislike it. And it's because there's nothing well, I don't like anything that happens. So yeah, I dislike it. I don't know what else to say. It's very silly. I don't know.
But honestly, the best part of it to me was using Shark's ability. Like if Shark had continued to be like the key to beating these robots, I would have been perfectly fine with that. That would have made much more sense to me than like the tanks running circles around them and stuff.
And then like our heroes, like, Hero Squad, they have a plan of like using the airship thing that was carrying like the water supply from the previous arc. They're going to use that to get aboard the ship while everyone's distracting. Cool. Love it. Makes sense to me. I'm also glad we're tying in like that old weird vehicle, reusing props from the previous story arc. That's awesome. And then like while they're flying in the air, like that sandward dragon thing jumps up in the air and attacks them because it's like alerted by sound. I don't understand this like at all.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm torn on this part. It
There's
makes
tanks
sense.
firing and laser beams going off over there, and the little thing hovering in the air is the thing that you attack.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that actually. Because it makes sense to me that the worm, it's a sandworm, it's a sand dragon, whatever. It can feel vibrations in the dirt, right? Sure. Yeah, this war is creating a big commotion. Okay, sure, you draw the attention of the sandworm. Your point about it jumping up to attack the one thing that it probably can't feel, that feels a little silly. You're right, absolutely.
Yeah, and then like, it jumps up not once but twice to try and get them, and that breaks the ship. And so Shiva hatches this plan to like shoot its tunnel to get his attention again, so that way they can go in its mouth. And then when it's in the air, he like fires his cannon to be blasted out the front. This felt very ham-fisted. Like we needed Shiva to do something clever. Let's invent a situation for him to solve in a not very logical way.
I kind of like him putting them in the dragon's mouth and then blasting him out of the dragon's mouth. I like it a little bit, but the way that they get to that point doesn't make any sense, like you said. So yes, it does feel very ham-fisted. It doesn't feel like an organic or well-written way to get to the cool action point of Shiva doing something tactically fun and interesting or tactically sound. So yeah, I agree. This whole fight is a mess, honestly.
This is my biggest critical point of like the entire 13 episode run, where I'm just like, I don't like I love everyone banding together to like do something cool to like save the day sort of thing, right? This should have been like this really almost like a wholesome moment where everyone's pulling together to try and take down the big baddie. And what actually happens is just this like comedy of errors that lead us back onto the fortress ship. And I'm just like, all right, whatever. Like I'm going to ignore all that happened, because for me, anything I think about doesn't match. Like it doesn't survive any level of scrutiny. I don't find anything to be particularly fun. So I'm going to just ignore everything that happened because I have nothing good to say about it. I think this is a bad sequence.
I agree. I think it does improve here a little bit going forward, fortunately. As we've got the main crew inside of the Graham Fortress, and they're just kind of driving their tank around inside the fortress.
Which I like that it's so big that you have to drive around it. Like that, it's one of those, it's a little detail, but like, duh, this thing's colossal. You would have to drive around it.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. They eventually come across like this sort of box warehouse sort of deal.
Yes, in episode 12, the final battle.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot we didn't even move forward to the episode. But the episode starts off with them driving around. They find like this big box storage area, and there are drones that are kind of like flying around moving the boxes, which is going to be relevant. Um, and eventually, as they're moving around, they alert Bread and Muniel to their presence. Which I think then kind of results in I guess it's important here too that Muniel announces to Sandland that he's basically going to fire the Graham weapon off on the capital of Sandland, and Bread is against it. He doesn't want to kill all of those helpless people.
Yeah, I mean, I think he even mentions to him that just the mere sight of this fortress ship should be enough to make them surrender. We don't need to kill anybody. And Muniel's not on board. I think Muniel mentioned something along the lines of he doesn't want to live on a world with people who befriend fiends or something along those lines. And I mean, it really tells you the mindset that Muniel's in. I mean, it's terrible. He's a terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah, he is a twisted angel. And this kind of turns into like they're having this argument back and forth, but Bread is like, all right, I'm going to leave this part to you, Muniel. I'm going to go take care of the pests who are on the ship. And I love this next sequence as Bread shows up on the scene, like breaking into this crate storage room where our heroes are, with this massive mech body that he's kind of like connected into. This thing has like, it very much has the vibes of like a Pilaf robot from Dragon Ball.
It does, yeah.
If Pilaf were competent.
I mean, I love it, and it also cracks me up. Seeing this giant ass mech with this little head just poking out the top of it, it cracks me up. But I mean, that's very Toriyama, and I love this look. I think it's actually a cool looking mech and a good design decision.
100%. I very much agree. I like the menacingness of it with also the comedy of it with the tiny little head, like you said. It's very, very well designed. And this basically just turns into a fight here as Bread goes on the offensive. He kind of like gets a few punches in on Beelzebub kind of defending the tank with Shiva, Anne, and Thief in it. And then Shiva tells Beelzebub, I thought this was going to be a fight with Beelzebub in it, but Shiva tells Beelzebub, hey, get to the control room, stop Muniel, we'll take care of Bread in his mech. And I was like, oh shit, this is going to be fun.
This, for me, I was like, all right, this is the final battle I care about, because I love Shiva. I love when they do the take tactics. I freaking love it. And yeah, Beelzebub just listens and goes zooming off as he runs deeper into the Graham, is what I started calling it in my notes. But yeah, the big thing is that he has to stop the control panel before the main weapon can fire again. And it's less than an hour at this point. So they're really up against the clock if they're going to stop the capital from being obliterated and countless people dying.
Yes, 100%. I really like, there's this scene where Muniel's like watching the radar or whatever, the sensors for the ship, and like door after door is just being busted open. He's like, what the hell? And he's like, oh shoot, it's that stupid demon coming to the control room.
We flip back over to Shiva and Thief as they man the battle tank, while Anne kind of makes her way above and hijacks some cargo drones to help out. And turns out this is really effective. She's like grabbing these floating drones with like these packages and flying it in front of Brad as he's trying to like launch himself towards the tank. And there's even a point where she like grabs like a pile of munitions and throws it in front of his face that Shiva shoots and causes to explode. So there's some cool like teamwork tactics happening in here. And this was an environment that we were introduced to, and they're utilizing it, and it's an interesting environment. So I actually like the exchange that's happening here.
I'm totally on board for this. We've already kind of, in some of the flashbacks, established that Anne likes to tinker with technology. She kind of fills the. This has a Dragon Ball connection to me in my mind, where she kind of fills the Balma role.
Yes.
Uh, we very much get like the Beelzebub as like Goku, Anne as sort of like Balma. And I'll actually say, just as a quick aside, I actually really like in Sandland the dynamic and the party composition. I almost feel like it's even better than Dragon Ball in some ways.
Ooh, shots fired.
I know. People might not like to hear that, but I like that each character fulfills a role. It feels like a Japanese RPG to me.
It really does.
So I think it's well done in that way. And each character continues to be relevant, which is important too. But this fight is pretty cool as they kind of continue on with the. I think Bread ends up firing off his big ass chest laser to stop Anne from controlling the drones, basically like blasting the control center for it.
Yeah, and meanwhile, while all this is happening, we see Muniel's made his way off the bridge and actually confronts Biel's, even taunting him with a pair of urns that contain his sister and his father. We see Muniel even laugh, and like while taunting Biel's, he turns the two urns into like energy balls and swallows them, which is something we've seen happen in Dragon Ball. I promise you, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
So I will say spoilers for Dragon Ball GT.
Piccolo's done it. I know he has.
Oh, you know what? Actually, that's a better comparison. Actually, at the end of, I was gonna say in GT they swallow a Dragon Ball, but at the end of the original Dragon Ball arc, Piccolo swallows the little bottle that Kami is in.
That's what I was trying to think of. That's the reference I was trying to make. Oh, yeah, it's the same demon containing bottle. Yes, that's the reference. We figured it out.
That's even a better reference. I was going to say the Dragon Ball later, but that's
I haven't
almost
seen
like
that, so we'll get to that. I might be dragging my feet getting to that, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, that's like a 1-to-1 parallel. That's a really good reference. But this is, I mean, now what? Like, I was excited for this because I was like, oh, Beelzebub's gonna have to fucking rip this angel apart to get those vases out and get his family back.
Yeah, but they begin their battle as there's a lot happening at once right now, and it's hard to go through all of it.
It's a lot of back and forth too.
But with Anne unable to really help out because the control panel for the drones has been destroyed by Bread's fire and laser, she decides to continue her way through the ship to try and help disable the weapon while Shiva and Thief continue their battle. And we see her actually arrive where Beelzebub and Muniel are fighting, and we see her start tapping her way into a nearby control panel to start powering down the fortress energies, or the fortress's reserve energy. And after a very stressful countdown, she's successful, and the fortress's energy is more or less shut down at this point.
Yeah, all the while, Beelzebub is fighting Muniel, basically trying to distract him. Like he sees Anne basically going to stop the laser, and yeah, again the tension there, like building, and then stopping. But we still got two big boss battles going on in the background as we kind of shift back over to Shiva fighting against Bread. He basically like pulls Bread into a dead end alley with all the crates and boxes, and Bread getting ready to fire off fire laser. Thief leaps onto the mech with the Peachy stun gun and fires it point blank at his skin, which kind of stops him for a moment. But doesn't fully stop him because he's a cyborg. And so Thief is like, oh, it didn't work. And then Shiva's like, well, it worked well enough, as Shiva fires into, similar to the other robots that were being fought before, when they fire their laser, they leave this opening in their chest or their eye or whatever you call it. And so Shiva fires the tank's gun directly down that entryway, and blows up the mech that Bread is in.
I missed this earlier, but there was this brief moment after Anne retreated further into the fortress where Thief actually asks Shiva, is like, all right, so what's your game plan now? And Shiva reveals that he actually didn't have a game plan. He just says that now it's time for the old men to be the sacrificial pawns in this story. So he was fully willing to sacrifice everything to make sure that everyone else was able to be saved.
It's a really great piece of dialogue and really great characterization for Shiva, who is, I mean, he's a war veteran. He's a hero now, after some doing some bad things, not of his own, not understanding the full details of what he was doing. But he's probably my favorite character. I really like him.
He's really good. He's had the most character growth, and I don't know. What a great character. But we do go back over to Muniel, who is now pissed that his fortress laser was shut down, and we see him strike Biel's down to the floor with his lightning, then forces like his weird control over Anne's body, and we see her being kind of pulled towards him as she struggles against like this screwdriver that it almost looks like she's being forced to like jam towards her own neck. And as she struggles to keep her own life, we see Biel's stand back up, kind of erupting in power as he angrily claws his way towards Muniel.
I like this a lot. This makes Muniel feel even more menacing and more evil, as he's trying to use Anne as a tool, as a point of weakness for Beelzebub, further cementing who is the good guy and who is the bad guy here. And Beelzebub unleashing his absorbed darkness, his eyes turning red, just like grabs the staff that Muniel has beat him with, launches Muniel across the room, and then stomps onto Muniel's forearm. I will say I love this scene, but I wish that this part had been done a little differently, because Beelzebub like stomps onto Muniel's forearm and then kicks him right in the jaw like a soccer ball, launching him up into what appears to be like the energy core for the Gram. But the one thing that I don't like about this is that this is a perfect opportunity to show some real violence.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, and like as Beelzebub stomps onto Muniel's arm, it basically just shows his arm flattened. Like it looks like a cartoon, like a Looney Tunes cartoon. And I wish they would have just shown Beelzebub just breaking Muniel's arm in this moment.
A cry out in pain, just like a little bit. Because I felt the same way where I looked at it and I had this like, I had to think twice about it. Because at first I was just like, oh yeah, he broke his arm. And I was just like, oh, maybe they just animated it weird because he's not really like reacting to it. And I was just like, no, that has to be on purpose. Like what was happening via animation wasn't really reflecting like their emotional state. Like there was this weird disconnect that I also noticed. So I'm glad you pointed that out because I felt the exact same way.
Yeah. I did not like it. And I mentioned this when Beelzebub was fighting the Bugmen, where in the last arc, where the Bugmen would have been the perfect opportunity to show, again, some real violence of just like ripping the Bugmen apart. But I don't think that it's a limitation of the visual medium necessarily. Like there's part of me that thought maybe, but I think that you could show like a broken arm even in this like CGI animated style. I think it's just a deliberate choice not to show violence. I think this show is just, I think it's just catered towards a younger audience, and it is frustrating for me.
Well, I mean, the audience range I think they're catering towards is the age I was when I was watching Dragon Ball Z. So for me, I'm just like, yeah, you can show more violence to 8-year-olds. Yeah, go for it.
To your point, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z has a lot of, like, Dragon Ball Z has people shoving their arms through other people's torsos and all kinds of blood and stuff. So Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z show quite a bit of high level violence.
I think we watched a child get his neck snapped.
Oh, Gohan? Yeah, 100%.
So that was cool. So yeah,
So
give me
yeah.
some violence. I don't know. I'm used to that. Like kids should experience violence. I don't know. Maybe I should die on the hill. All right, never mind. Let's keep moving on. Oh shoot.
But I guess moving back to the story
I
here.
do like Munio's legs like dangling from the ceiling. I definitely got like the One Punch Man vibes where he's like doing the tryouts or whatever. I don't know. That made me laugh a little bit.
Yeah, when Saitama jumps up into the roof. Yeah, 100%. Muniel does eventually extract himself, kind of getting like almost like a rage boost here in a moment, almost like Beelzebub himself, but Muniel pulls himself out. His face is blue. He looks like a blueberry. And he's just like, I'm not going to let a demon disrespect me like this. And he starts sucking in the energy, presumably like I guess it's not Aquanium. I don't know what
I
it
think
would
it
be.
is Aquanium. I think it is Aquanium energy. I think they do mention something along those lines.
You're right. He does say that. The reason I say that though is because I thought that Aquanium was like volatile, like explosive, and he kind of like destroyed the container for the Aquanium. I don't know. Maybe it's not explosive in that way. It's a weird
I'm
detail.
not going to ask too many questions. I mean, I'm willing to go with at least volatile because the reaction his body has to absorbing it, I would definitely say is volatile as we see his body begin like expanding outwards, almost in this like pudgy form before we see him actively concentrate and snap it into this, I mean, still grotesque, but muscular form, but complete with new angel wings at least.
Yeah, he manages to kind of control or concentrate this Aquanium power boost and just turn into this fucking yoked out angel form with these big new angel wings. I'm not gonna lie, I'm all about this whole new form. This like yoked out angel is
Dude, that
fantastic.
stuff like grosses me out when you see people's bodies start getting like really distended and warped and stuff like when Boo forced himself into that like one innocent civilian's mouth and like caused his body to expand. That stuff grosses me out. Or when Bobbity throws the stuff that causes people to like Hulk out and explode. I don't know why, but that stuff grosses me the hell out. I do not like in the good way, by the way. Like it's good that I don't like this because it grosses me out.
That's how I feel about it too. I very much agree. I like that it makes me feel like these visceral emotions of like just disgust. So yeah, it's well done. I think that kind of takes us into the next episode, right?
It does, which is the final episode, episode 13. The battle comes to an end. And this one kicks off with Shiva and Thief as they take their tank. That's a tough one to say. Take their tank and make their way forward. But it's revealed that at this point that as they're leaving, there's still some life left in Bread. That his eyes kind of snap open as they leave the battle site. And it's at this point that they actually run into Anne, who's making her way from the bridge. She decided that she's going to stay on board while everyone's retreating, like taking the escape vessels. She's going to try and buy more time to save more lives. And she actually runs into Shiva and Thief as they kind of cross paths as Shiva and Thief make their way towards the final battle, and Anne makes her way to like the energy reserves.
Right. And we kind of cut back over to Beelzebub fighting yoked Muniel, and he's taking like blow after blow from just this massive angel, and he's getting knocked around pretty heavily. He ends up using his metallification ability to try to absorb some of the blows, which works with somewhat limited success. And then this fight has some great sequences in it where Beelzebub kind of tries to slide and like take out Muniel's legs so that, you know, he's big, he's gonna like topple over and hurt himself. And Muniel changes from the muscled form to the just big flabby form and just plops down on top of Beelzebub, just using his fat foo to get the better of Beelzebub in the moment. It's really well done.
Yeah, It's interesting. It's weird watching like Muniel's body kind of change back and forth as just like I mean, there's also like gross purple lines going through him and stuff. Everything about him's gross. Oh, I don't like it. So I'm gonna go back over to Anne, who arrives at the energy reserve room, and as she goes to get to work, a piece like this big pipe from the ceiling kind of breaks loose and is falling down towards her. And this is where we see Bread actually arrive on scene, and he catches this big pipe, saving Anne's life. And he reveals that he was actually trying to prevent war by using the gram as kind of a precursor to stop it before it ever really happened. Um, but he was blinded by its power, and by the time he realized who Muniel really was, it was too late for him to stop him. And so now he's helping Anne because Anne's helping save his men.
Yeah, I was at first a little bit torn on this turn, but at the same time, they've established this in Bread's character from the very beginning.
He's been a lot less like prone to like killing people than Muniel. Like Muniel's just like, oh well, you've associated with fiends. We should kill all of you. We should kill your whole nation. Whereas Bread's been more like I will do a show of force, but I'm less likely to use it unless I have to.
Yes, 100%. So when I stopped to think about it, they actually did a very good job of kind of like leading us uh, to this point, basically expressing like, Bread's not a wholly bad person.
Well, all the most devious, terrible crap that the army's done, Muniel was usually the person at the helm.
Yeah, 100%. And this kind of moves forward here with continuing the main fight between Beelzebub and Muniel. Muniel now like shooting out full out key blasts at Beelzebub, but this turns into there's something wrong with Muniel's body. The measure of control that he had with being able to shapeshift it is no longer present, as part of his body just turns into kind of like the big flabby bits, and he's almost unable to even move because of it.
Yeah, it's God, I hate this stuff. And his solution is that apparently he's running low on juice, so he decides to call on some more aquanium energy from the ship, and we see him just juice up even more, and we see him kind of snap his body back into that muscular form. Because I mean, before it was weird because it was like one half of his body was like kind of muscular, but like his thigh was like exploding outwards. I mean, everything about this is gross. Why are you making me talk about it?
I know it's your favorite. You actually had a really good, before we started the recording, you made a really good parallel for this and Dragon Ball Super.
That's right. The vibes I was getting from this, maybe not necessarily like a scene for scene thing, but definitely I felt like there was some inspiration. I felt a lot of Zamatsu vibes from this, where you have this angelic figure whose bodies become distorted because of his want for power. And so you see this angelic figure kind of falling apart before your eyes. And I definitely see kind of a similar parallel between Muniel and Zamatsu, at least at a base level. And I mean, also, just both of them are gross. So we've got two gross angel things. How can I not compare them?
Yeah, I didn't catch that, so I really liked Dayton's comparison there, because there's definitely some heavy parallels here in terms of story and just visual effect as far as what's going on with their bodies and whatnot. But this kind of turns into Muniel 100% has the upper hand. We actually see Beelzebub is like run out of his dark energy, and he's unable to really do much else. But he is saved in the moment by a tank shot from
the amount
Shiva.
of times that something's happening and then there's a but is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong.
But Shiva and Thief arrive on scene, and they actually kind of shoot the finishing blast that was being summoned by Muniel, assumably saving Beelzebub's life. And this is where Muniel is once again angry, and he turns to throw his own blast over at Shiva, and Beelzebub kind of gets back up and begins fighting again. And but Beelzebub, I believe, is knocked down once more. There's a lot happening right now. Beelzebub's knocked down once more. And during this kind of like monologue, Shiva kind of slowly skirts up to the scene and fires another tank round at Muniel that just whizzes by the top of his head, impacting the fortress grab in the background. This time, though, this hole ripped into the wall reveals the moon outside, which lets the darkness in.
Yeah, there's actually one little detail I want to talk about right before that, where Muniel is like curb stomping Beelzebub, and then has I'm just going to call them key blasts because that's what they are. Has a key blast up in the air, raised overhead, as if to deliver the finishing blow to Beelzebub. And Thief is even yelling at Shiva, like, shoot the tank round, because they only have one tank round left. And Shiva's like, I need to make sure I take the perfect shot. And so Shiva holds. Shiva doesn't shoot Muniel in this moment. And Muniel delivers the key blast, blasting Beelzebub. And Thief is kind of distraught for a moment. He's like, oh, the prince is dead. And Shiva is like, Thief, you were the one who told me that Beelzebub is the toughest demon around. Like, have some faith in him. And that's the moment that Shiva like shoots the roof open, revealing the moonlight right onto Beelzebub.
Yeah, and it is a clever moment. And it's cleverly done, right? Like, you've got the last shot and he misses and Shiva never misses, and you're like, well, you're right, Shiva never misses. And this is where we see Beelzebub kind of rising back to his feet, reinvigorated and just engulfed in red energy. Very Dragon Ball Z feeling at this point, but
very
red.
Kaioken.
And Beelzebub just rushes in at this point, and we see him launching just this massive punch to the pudgy belly of Muniel, who's just sent flying from the ship as the fat kind of ripples away from the landing spot of his punch.
Yeah, this is cool. Right before that, too, there's a funny moment that I wanted to make a brief Dragon Ball parallel to, where Muniel is firing off key blasts very Vegeta style, just like dozens of key blasts. And as we know with Vegeta, that technique or that strategy never works.
The panic key attack didn't work. Wow. I love it. This massive gut punch, though, causes Muniel to spit up the urns that housed Biel's family, and they fall to the ground, and we see them crack as Muniel flies from the ship.
Yeah, this is interesting. And once more, I don't know, Muniel kind of gets team rocketed out of here, very much like Commander Zhao or Supreme General Zhao, whatever the hell his name is. I'm a little bit bummed that I want more violence. I want more people dying.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's a character who deserves like something real bad happening to him, it's got to be Muniel. There's pretty much no redeeming quality.
Yeah, he is going to get a little bit of comeuppance here as we kind of wrap up the last episode. But first, our heroes need to figure out what to do with the Gram, because even with the reserve power routed to the ship, it's still going to crash. And with the Aquanium on it, it's going to be a big explosion.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is our remaining heroes, or including Bread, who's now one of the good guys, they all take one of those peachy pills that let them float for 10 seconds, and they jump from the ships that way they can softly land on the ground. But Anne decides to remain behind to try and somewhat nullify the Aquanium before it crashes into the ground and explodes everything. And we see her kind of go over to the reactor, and it seems like she's somewhat successful. and we see her kind of resign herself to the fate of the ship. But Beelzebub somehow comes back and saves her, so she doesn't die. This show's allergic to consequences.
I mean, there is another show and story by Akira Toriyama that is allergic to consequences.
It wasn't the entire time, damn it.
That's true.
But yeah, Beelzebub grabs Anne and jumps from the ship, and as it explodes, we see Beelzebub kind of carrying Anne on his shoulders, just trying to make it out as fast as he can, but they are eventually engulfed by the explosion. We see Lucifer arrive on site, and we see him kind of lift up his arms, and he contains the explosion to a relative area, so that way he doesn't kind of explode the entire landscape. And within the explosion, we see that Lilith has actually saved Anne and Beelzebub from being engulfed by the explosion. So everyone kind of gets their little piece.
Yeah, and this is kind of cool. Like, Beelzebub did the work to free Lucifer and Lilith. So it's also cool to see Lucifer and Lilith in action. There's something to be said here too for Lucifer containing the explosion. I mean, it saves his son, but he also is potentially saving humans' lives, as well as just saving the land that the humans use. So there's something to be said for Lucifer basically not being such a bad guy, as we're kind of seeing this theme with the demons are not all bad.
I mean, if anything, the demons have always just kind of been hanging out. It's everyone else that's been screwing with them.
100%. Yeah, the only thing that's really bad about them is honestly their name. They, like, people have this idea that demons are bad. But Anne is kind of reunited with her mother Lilith after I don't even know how long. It's probably been a decade or more. Lucifer does give some praise to Beelzebub, telling him good job.
I like this scene. I like the character that they make for Lucifer, where Anne says, "Hello, Grandpa," and Lucifer says, "No, you're gonna call me King Lucifer. Don't ever call me that again," which is funny. He tells Beelz that it's the first thing he tells Beelzebub is that as soon as we get home, you're gonna catch up on that homework. Also, you did well.
I like this a lot. Yeah, I agree. I really like the way Lucifer is written. I also want to know what kind of homework does Beelzebub have?
I don't know. They've got all the slapstick jokes of, like, they're just sitting around watching TV and playing Game Boy, and like they really make these demons out to be much more average, like, people than you would expect.
100%, which I enjoy. We find out that Anne basically made science happen and made the aquanium turn into water, which admittedly, I actually do like this as the water kind of like rains down across Sandland. I like this because this was already established with the Peachy, right? In the last arc, they said this is what the Peachy were trying to do, is use aquanium to create, I think they said create an infinite source of water. And so this is kind of like tying into that element where Anne was able to, I don't think it's an infinite source, or I guess we don't really find out, but was able to, at least in some way, use the aquanium to create water.
Yeah, they're trying to bring water or rain or something to Sandland. Outside of that, Muniel is in trouble. We learn this little baby angel thing, like pacifier and everything, comes flying down and tells him that he is in trouble with the Archangel, and yeah, he's going to be stocking shelves for the next 1,000 years.
I like this. I like this part a lot. It kind of, on some level, gives me vibes of like Zeno from Dragon Ball Super, the like supreme ruler who basically feels like a child. It also, though, I don't know if you've seen this or remember this, Dayton, but in Yu Yu Hakusho, there was
Nope,
like,
I don't remember it.
Okay, there was basically a god-like entity who was a supreme ruler who almost had the same character design, looked like a little baby with a pacifier. So it feels very much, it has that same sort of like gag vibe to it.
Yeah. And I mean, we pretty much wrap things up with seeing that Forest Land is back in its peaceful state, and our heroes all are in the sheriff's car, and they're beginning some new adventure. And that's the end of Sandland.
Yeah, the only other little detail, King Jam is back on the throne with
Yeah, King
Queen
Jam,
Lilith.
Red and Jam. So what was your opinion? How do you feel about Sandland Part 2?
It's a mixed bag. I think the first arc was better. I think that it was I think finding about the world was very interesting, finding about the characters. I think that the story as a whole was there, like you said in this one, there's a lot more like telling rather than showing. And I think there was a lot more showing in the first arc. I think we got to like see the demon village and how they interact with one another. And we got to see like all of Shiva's story, very little of it. We did see flashbacks for Shiva's story because you have to, basically, since, you know, it happened in the past. But a lot of it was revealed in a much better pacing and kind of revealed like over time. Like you kind of eventually find out like, oh, he's a general, like, oh, and then later you find out, oh, he blew up the Peachy people. And you find out like all these little details that's kind of like trickled out to you. And I'm kind of trying to decide how I feel about the two villains presented. I actually really like Muniel in concept as a villain. And like I like the angels versus demon idea. I think that especially when this probably originally came out, like right now in 2024 when we're recording this, and I think the year that this was released, the idea of circumventing people's expectations like demons and angels and stuff, it's been done in media a million different times. But when this first came out, this was probably a very fresh idea of circumventing those expectations.
Yeah. And I mean, it's well made, right? So I don't like the 3D animation kind of stuff. This is probably the best I've seen it done. So you know, effort was put into this. So but yeah, to kind of go, I guess, off of my opinions on the second part, I think I agree with you. I like the first part actually significantly more personally. I like going through Shiva's character's growth and experience. I think it's good storytelling when you can kind of walk into a new world and learn with somebody, which is what I felt was happening with Shiva. Like we learned about the true nature of fiends with Shiva. We learned about his nation's history and the actual betrayal that happened with Shiva. I liked being able to go on his journey and being able to react to the situation with him. It felt like I was there with somebody, and there was somebody who was there who was reacting the way that I would have. So the story felt more relatable. Shiva felt like a relatable character, and his emotions I felt like I could connect with. In the second story arc, I don't know who the main character was. It might have been Anne. I don't think it was Shiva. It might have been Beelzebub. Because it had to do with like his family, because they're all related. I don't really know who the main character was. I also don't feel like we got to really dive into any character's emotional state very deeply at all through a lot of this. We had emotional moments, but we didn't explore those feelings. And so I definitely knock it for that. It felt like it was trying to get story across to me, but it wasn't trying to get character across to me. And I felt like that was missing through a lot of this. It's a fine story. The parts connect. The characters have motivations. I like Brett as a character. I think he's one of the more interesting characters introduced in this story arc. But outside of that, I think the first story arc is like it's a lot more enjoyable for me. The pacing also feels better in the first story arc. So I have a lot of bugaboos with the second one. There are definitely good parts, and I did enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as the first one.
I don't remember having much in the way of problems with the first one. My biggest complaint was the lack of violence, and which really just kind of plays into my biggest complaint about the show in general is just for me, it's just catered to a younger audience, and it doesn't appeal to me as much. But
Yeah, I think
in
we
the
mentioned that the
second,
first time, right? Where it was just like we're not the target audience, and I can only knock it down so much because of that.
yeah, and that's as far as the first arc. That was probably my only real big complaint. And like you said, it's just because I'm not the target audience doesn't mean it's not a good show. Um, but the second arc, I have a number of complaints. Like you and I, neither one of us liked the big war fight in this one between the robots and the tanks. It just didn't feel good. There I wanted to actually talk or kind of expand on my thoughts about what you were expressing with the first arc to me. The first arc to me is not Beelzebub's story, even though Beelzebub is arguably the main character. It is 100% Shiva's story. And it is the introduction to Beelzebub and the introduction to the demon village, but we're following through Shiva's narrative. Even the bad guy is somebody from Shiva's history, somebody that he has to overcome and try to correct wrongs in his past. And all of that is him. And again, like I said, he's probably my favorite character, and maybe the first arc is part of the reason for that. Which, conversely, for the second arc, Shiva is basically a side character, almost 100%. He does cool things as like a fighter or like the general that he is, but there's almost nothing in terms of narrative connection for him in the story. The only reason that he's even here is because he's friends with Beelzebub, and he's a good guy. He wants to help people. This The reason I thought I wasn't going to like this arc initially is because we're introduced to Anne, and I thought it was just going to be Anne's story, which I was proven wrong a little bit. Like, this is definitely Anne's story as well as Beelzebub's story. So I am glad, like you said, Dayton, that they at least tied this narrative back to Beelzebub and his family being captured, so he has reason to care about what's going on. I kind of like getting to see again the dynamic between the angels and the demons, and having that kind of flipped on its head, where the demons are the good guys and the angels are the bad guys. But there are too many issues that I have with this arc in terms of the way that the story's told, the way that like I said, Shiva takes a back seat 100%. Anne is she's a fine character. Like, her story is fine. It doesn't feel nearly as compelling as Shiva's story. She, I wouldn't say that she's a damsel in distress. Like, she does a lot. She has that kind of Balma vibe. But she's just not, her growth isn't really, she doesn't really change that much, does she?
I don't think so. You also don't really get like a strong sense of like what her personality is, right? Like with Shiva, he's the wise old man sort of thing with a military past, and he kind of acts that way. With Beelzebub, he's the fiend prince, and he's kind of a kid with like an edgy attitude sort of thing. Thief's a coward. Anne's personality is like maybe a little edgy at times. I don't really understand who Anne is. Anne feels like a character who exists because of their surrounding circumstances. Like, I don't know, like, you exist because you're part fiend and your dad's a king. And it's just like, I would like to have seen a little bit more character to that character.
That's a really good point. Like, I had kind of mentioned earlier that I like the roles that the characters fit, even like, especially once we get Anne in here too, because she's kind of like the tech person, and that's I like that.
I love that character and everything. Give me her doing more tech stuff. Like, I would have loved to have seen that.
That's true. Yeah, we didn't get a ton of it. We got a little bit, and I like her filling that role. But I agree with you that we don't really. She's got kind of a bland, kind of bland characterization. I feel like. We have a little bit of conflict with her being like part demon, but that doesn't really get explored all that well. Yeah, I honestly, a lot of this is pacing to me. It feels like if this arc had been stretched out to a full 13 episodes, I think it would solve a good chunk of the problems. Yeah, it's just not as well put together a story as the
We
first
needed more time to
arc.
spend on characters. Like I mean, I was definitely getting like beginning of Kai vibes where we were just hitting one plot point and zooming right off to the next one. It was just like, well, how do they feel about the situation? Because I'm like, we're just going from here to here to here to here.
I think you said it earlier. I really would have liked to explore Beelzebub's feelings about his family getting captured. Like you just kind of have this brief scene of him like sitting on a rock, and then afterwards he's like, all right, let's go save my family. It's like, okay, sure, but I want to explore that more.
Yeah, I think fixing the pacing so that way they could spend more times on heavier issues and like letting the characters actually develop and grow. I think would have solved a lot of this because the actual story, just like the raw story, the macro view, I think is actually pretty good. Like everyone has motivations for what they're doing. I think you have a serviceable enough set of villains, and the circumstances are compelling enough where you understand why they're risking their skin to fight this giant fortress thing. But like the man, I just needed more character. That's it. That's the big thing that's missing for me is the character side. And the thing is a lack of character side could be forgiven if we had more and better like fight scenes and choreography and like just more junk food to eat. Because I'm sorry, but I don't think the 3D animation stuff displays choreography super well. I think you lose a lot of artistic take when you do it that way. And on top of that, we didn't get very many or very long fight scenes in this. So it just felt like I was just chewing on plot points and story almost the entire time.
I think I almost everything that you've said I largely agree with. There are some sequences like we talked about with Shiva having a fist fight with Bread. Like I loved that. I thought it looked great, especially for the 3D animation.
Mhm.
I think that they like at least some sequences like that. They do a pretty good job with the choreography. It feels like almost more like watching a live action film because like you said, you can't because it's not animation, you can't be as dynamic with your sequences and with the you can't just go off model like you can in animation. You can like
Mhm.
stretch things out and make it look really cool and dramatic. So the 3D animation kind of holds the show back in that way, unfortunately. But if they did more of those like hand to hand fight scenes like with Shiva, I really enjoy watching those in the 3D animation. So unfortunately, we did not get much of that in this arc.
I think I've pretty much said my part. I had a good time, but could have been done better. I think the first story arc is where it's at. But yeah, that's everything for me.
Yeah, I think I've said pretty much everything here as well. Yeah, I for anybody listening, if you want to check out Sandland, go watch the first arc. The second arc, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it. It has good pieces, but it's not nearly as good as the first.
I don't think it's bad. It's not like it's a bad experience. It's just there's so much potential that was left on the table. Like there's this version of it that it could have been, and it just doesn't live up to it.
Yeah, I very much agree. But I think it sounds like that's going to be it for this episode of Instant Transmission, where we discuss everything Dragon Ball and sort of Sandland. This has been your host, Todd.
And Dayton.
Don't forget, we're on Patreon and Twitter. If you want to help us expand like an angel high on Aquanium, you can find us at patreon.com/ITDBpodcast and over on Twitter at x.com/ITDBpodcast. Our podcast episodes come out every other Monday morning, so you can enjoy some Dragon Ball goodness on your commute. Please like, review, subscribe, whatever all those different things they ask you to do on your favorite podcasting platform you're listening to us on. And thank you all so much for your support.
We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Be sure to join us next time as we wish for our science lab to be de-thawed in Dragon Ball Z movie number 2, The World's Strongest. Gohan and Oolong are on a search for the Dragon Balls, but their plans quickly get thwarted by a mad scientist who just wants to get back to his research and abduct the world's strongest fighter. What does this scientist want with the world's strongest? How does Gohan get caught up in his mess? And why does Piccolo always have to save him? If you could switch out your body for Master Roshi's, would you do it? Find out next time. And to all our fellow Dragon Ball fans, stay safe out there, and remember to keep rocking the dragon.
Man, you ready to do another one?
I gotta get the sand out of my cheeks.
Oh, God.